I'm telling you, you lay a finger on me, Anne, and you've had it. You'll never... Oh, terrible. Oh, terrible sight.
He didn't do anything!
Of course not. He knows a friendly tap when he sees one. He knows you're not hurting me.
All right, then. I'll hit you for real this time. I'll really hurt you.
You will you?
Here.
What for?
Well, I want to see what he's like.
He.
Bring me sunshine. Those three little words can still light up a British living room decades after they were first sung by the most iconic double act in UK television history, Morecambe and Wise. Eric and Ernie weren't just entertainers, they were a Christmas institution, national treasures whose sketches, catchphrase, and sheer charm united generations. But behind the slapstick and sparkle, their offstage lives told a very different story. For all their easy chemistry on screen, the personal lives of Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise were defined by a bitter divide that had nothing to do with the men themselves, but rather their wives. The wives behind the comedy. When Eric Morecambe married beauty queen and singer Joan Bartlett in 1952, and Ernie Wise tied the knot with dancer Doreen Blythe just 6 weeks later, the press celebrated the two weddings as the beginning of a golden era for the men behind Britain's brightest comedy duo. But rather than bonding the two couples into a tight-knit social circle, these marriages had the opposite effect. Joan and Doreen, it seems, simply couldn't stand each other. The source of their animosity remains a blend of personal clashes and perceived hierarchies, but ventriloquist John Bouchier, who toured extensively with Eric and Ernie in the 70s, put it bluntly, quote, "The boys never socialized because the wives didn't get on. Ernie's wife thought he was the star and that Eric couldn't manage without him, and so consequently, although they were electric on stage, they never mixed." This inability to get along created a distinct boundary in the men's private lives. While their professional bond was unshakable, their personal one was stunted by necessity. Eric and Joan raised a family, welcoming their first child, Gail, just 10 months after their wedding. They represented a picture of domesticity and traditional family life. Ernie and Doreen, by contrast, chose not to have children. Doreen explained years later that their child-free marriage was an intentional decision designed to protect their relationship and keep Ernie focused on his career. It was, she claimed, a matter of fidelity. Quote, "If I traveled with him and we kept up our sex life, he'd never be tempted to stray," she said in a rare 1999 interview. But there was more than just a clash of lifestyles at play. Doreen made no secret of her early irritation with Eric's constant presence when she first began dating Ernie. In 2009, she recounted those days with a sharp-edged humor. Quote, "We could never get rid of him. He was always in the way. I used to joke that we'd have to find a girl for Eric, otherwise we'd be lumbered with him forever." Such comments, although delivered in jest, hint at a long-standing resentment that colored her relationship with Joan, who swiftly became Eric's steadying influence. If the wives had shared common ground or made an effort to warm to each other, perhaps the story would be different. But Joan, a fiercely protective partner who guided Eric through his bouts of anxiety and poor health, had little patience for Doreen's sharpness and vice versa. As their husband's fame grew, so too did the need for diplomacy between the women, yet neither was willing to yield. Professional magic, personal distance. The irony, of course, is that while Joan and Doreen couldn't stand one another, their husbands were creating some of the most beloved television of the 20th century. Eric and Ernie were inseparable on stage, presenting themselves as a duo whose lives were practically intertwined. Sketches often portrayed them sharing a flat, a bed, and even the occasional squabble that ended in laughter. Their act was seamless, their timing perfect, their humor unmistakably warm. To the millions watching, Morecambe and Wise weren't just friends, they were family. But behind that public image was a clear divide. Off camera, the two couples rarely socialized, and that wasn't by accident. Ernie and Doreen carved out a life that was centered around each other and their shared commitment to his career, while Eric and Joan were deeply embedded in family life, raising their children and finding joy in their domestic routine. This split mirrored their personal choices, but also spoke volumes about the strain caused by the wives' relationship. Eric and Ernie may have spent endless hours working together, but they didn't extend that closeness into their downtime. This separation was particularly striking during their most successful years at the BBC in the late 1960s and 70s. Producer John Ammons, who helped perfect their television formula, orchestrated some of the duo's finest moments. He brought in big-name guests, polished their routines, and helped them craft a style of comedy that resonated across Britain. But even at their peak, when fame might have tempted other stars into glittering showbiz circles, Ernie and Eric were content to retreat into their respective private worlds, an arrangement largely dictated by their wives' inability to mix. It is a curious thing. How did this personal distance not erode their professional chemistry? The answer lies in their mutual respect and extraordinary work ethic. Eric and Ernie kept any offstage tension firmly away from the studio floor. Whatever issues brewed between Joan and Doreen stayed behind closed doors. Their shared ambition, coupled with Eddie Braben's witty scripts, allowed them to maintain a unified front, ensuring that the public never saw the cracks in their private lives. Indeed, one could argue this separation even strengthened their professional dynamic. With personal lives so distinct and compartmentalized, the toll of fame and ill health.
Is he in?
You mean Eric?
Yeah.
Yes.
Suppose he's changed quite a lot, eh?
We all have.
Yes.
20 years is a long time.
For Eric Morecambe, the strain of his career was felt most acutely in his health. In 1968, at just 42, he suffered his first heart attack. A slight one by the reports of the time, though those close to him knew it had been far more serious. It was a stark reminder of the physical and emotional toll that life in the spotlight can exact. Even Ernie, usually a rock of quiet optimism, reportedly confided to a colleague that he wasn't sure how much longer the partnership could last. "He's not good," he admitted. "I don't know how long we can keep going." Eric, ever the professional, recovered and returned to work, but the shadow of the heart attack lingered. A second attack in 1979, followed by bypass surgery and later a fatal third in 1984, left him physically diminished but determined to continue performing. Joan, by his side through each crisis, became his pillar of strength. She took on the role of not only a wife but a caretaker, making sure Eric could manage the demands of their shared life without crumbling under the pressure. This commitment, however, deepened the wedge between Joan and Doreen. To Joan, the sacrifices she made to support Eric were proof of her devotion. To Doreen, they were the evidence of the very domestic entanglements she had deliberately avoided. Doreen and Ernie's child-free, travel-heavy lifestyle was intentionally designed to prevent such burdens. It's easy to see how these fundamentally different worldviews could spark resentment, particularly as Ernie and Doreen quietly enjoyed the freedom that Joan and Eric had willingly surrendered for the sake of family stability. A partnership held together by performance. The story so remarkable was that despite the frostiness between Joan and Doreen, Eric and Ernie remained inseparable on stage until the end. They performed through personal upheavals, ill health, and private tensions. Their final years brought triumph and tragedy. The 1977 Morecambe and Wise Christmas special drew in an astonishing 28 million viewers, a figure that has yet to be matched by any British comedy show. But behind the scenes, Eric's health was failing, and the ongoing separation between the couples underscored how fragile the partnership was. When Eric died suddenly in 1984 at age 58, Ernie was devastated. He later described his friend as a brother, a sentiment made all the more heartbreaking when one considers how little of their personal lives they were able to share. Now it's time to hear from you. What was the most surprising part of this story? Let us know in the comments section below.